Hello, everybody. Oleg Moskalansky here with Productive Computer Systems. For those that don't know me, have been in information technology for the past, about 34 or so, 35 years, something like that, over 30 for sure. And I've done a lot of different things for a lot of different businesses. Mostly, I spent a lot of time with in the hospitality industry, I should say, dealing with different resorts, timeshare companies, basically designing custom computer systems for business needs is kind of the easiest way to describe it. And at the same time, also got into the whole internet thing when it started, and have been doing that mostly recently in terms of designing new systems and where they should be run. And so I'm kind of an IT guy, what you would call. And then it's my pleasure to have today with me Mr. David Kutcher from the Confluent Forms is the name of the company. I apologize. And David, welcome, and please say a few words about yourself.
Sure. So, David Kutcher, I'm the co-owner of Confluent Forms. We're a web design, web development, strategic consulting company. But we have clients about everywhere these days, and yeah, we're doing more strategy these days. A lot more strategy as companies really want to take advantage of the internet as opposed to just having their website up there. And that translates into lots of things like Google Analytics, search engine optimization, content marketing, all kinds of fun things. So I end up being the jack of all trades these days.
Okay, so contrary to David, who seems to know a lot of stuff about everything, I don't, because I couldn't even pronounce his name straight. It's Kutcher, it's not Kutcher, right?
It's Kutcher, but don't worry. As long as you don't add an N to it, I'm okay.
Okay, so Kutcher. Okay, so we got David Kutcher. Okay, we got that straight. At least I do. So the first thing I wanted to do is, today's conversation with David is going to be about. First, I'll give you a little backstory. That there was a post, which I can't remember what it was, but something that I think either David originated or participated in, and he made a brief comment about frequently accessed questions page on websites, or FAQs as they call them. We just kind of started talking. We decided to put this together because it's important. But for a few days now, both him and I were thinking about it, and both of us realized just how important this actually is and how useful it can be if done properly. And so it's a very small item if you look at the whole universe of internet and web and everything else. But when you kind of dig down deep, you see just how important and how useful this can be. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is this frequently accessed questions pages, or FAQs. And of course, the concept itself is very simple. You have a question and you have an answer. So it's not any kind of brilliant, oh my God, how did we ever not think of this before? It's a pretty simple concept. You have a question, you have an answer. And a lot of times what people do, at least in my estimation, is they overcomplicate things. And you start talking to them about some kind of acronym or something, people immediately go into this thinking about something much more complex than it needs to be. And this is really simple. It's a question and it's an answer. That's the basic definition of what goes into an FAQ. If you're asking the question as why didn't they call it FAQA, because it's question and answer, it's not just questions, that would be a legitimate good question. And the only thing that comes to my mind thinking about it is that they were trying to come up with a word, and FAQA would be a 4-letter word that starts with the letter F, which is not a good thing usually. So with that being the case, that's, I think, why they went with FAQ only. With that said, let me show you an example of what FAQ might possibly look like. Let me just quickly pull up this little presentation I put together for you. And so here's, an example. We're talking about web pages. This is a Google presentation, but same kind of concept. So, like I mentioned, we have Mr. David Kutcher here with us, and myself, and both of us are going to be driving this FAQ discussion today. So FAQ can look as something as simple as this. You have a bunch of questions, and each question will have an answer. And one of the things is, of course, what are the answers? Like in this case, as you can see, these are links right there. So a lot of people do that on the websites as well. And you just click on the question on the link, you get an answer. I mean, that's the idea. And so you can see that they don't eat up too much space. I put all the questions on one page. So, for those who want to know what Morris Day's song was Jungle Love. The reason I put these specific questions together is not necessarily to wow you with my music knowledge or anything, but to show you how, in addition to this being an extremely useful tool, it can be also extremely misused. Okay, and so some of the examples I'm showing you here, they're not just random, examples that mean nothing. Everything I put here has a certain meaning to it, and this particular question here is, who cares? So you come up with a website, you see a FAQ, and there is a question there that they put on there that's supposed to be a frequently asked question, and it really has nothing to do with anything. So this is my Morris Day question right there. Another question people might ask, looking at David's last name, is how is David related to Ashton Kutcher? And the answer is they spell their names the same way. So there is your answer there. Another completely useless answer that you might find somewhere on the website. Then there is a more relevant question like this: where was I born? And the answer is in the wrong country. And so the bottom line is that it's a really simple way to get to different places and be able to easily get answers. That's what FAQs are all about. And you can just go down the list, and there's another question, and you get an answer to that. And then you can even go out of line. Out of step. I don't have to go one at a time. I can just say, well, is it true that Oleg used to play music? Let's see. According to this video, apparently it's true. And so the reason I put this here is to show you that clearly didn't want to just show you how cute I was when I was a kid, but also show you that you can actually use frequently asked questions setups like this to show a video. It doesn't have to be text only. And so this is just a small example, but at the same time makes the point about the fact that it doesn't have to be text only. And then we'll get to this one at the very end as well. But in terms of that kind of question, yeah, you can definitely hire either one of us for different projects. David is in Massachusetts. I'm in Washington State. But obviously, being on the internet, basically it's like being next to each other, just like you see us here. So the reason, like I said, I put this thing together is just to give you a brief little introduction here to FAQs here. And let me just jump back out of the presentation and actually get into the discussion. So again, FAQ is very simple in terms of its concept. It's a list of items, questions that people usually would ask, and answers to those questions. And if you think about the website from the development of the website standpoint, and you think about relevance of the content you put in there, and you let's just drill it down to the very, very basic, the core, okay? The reason you normally would do a website is to present some information, some content to an audience of some sort. Okay, and usually people make websites and they tell you need to put content, you need to put good content, you need to address your audience, and so on and so forth, which are all good concepts. But when they say you need to know who your market is, it's one of the things they tell you need to know who your market is, who you're talking to. It's a very difficult thing to figure out what your market could be. In some cases, it's plain as it can get. Like I just recently had a little system I designed for reminders for like doctor's offices, any business that has multiple reminder needs for customers coming back all the time. It's pretty simple. If you look at doctors, you look at dentists, you look at chiropractors, all these people do appointments all the time. So that would be my target audience for that particular product. But a lot of times businesses don't really know. You may be making clothes products, which are for men of all sizes and ages, women of all sizes and ages, kids of all sizes and ages. So your audience is really everybody out there. So it's kind of tough to in a lot of cases to say what the audience will be that will come to the website you're designing. At the same time, a lot of businesses make a mistake of designing the website from their own perspective, meaning I'm designing my business website, I know what should be on there. Most of the time, I shouldn't say most of the time, in many cases, that's not the case. Yes, you may have strong feelings, but you're not designing the website for yourself. You're designing it for people who are going to come to that website. And the easiest way to describe people who come to your website, in my view at least, is I usually break it down to two categories. You got people who already know you, your existing customers, and you got people who don't know you. Okay, that's the easy way to get past the thing where is my demographic customers, what are they like, how much money they make. I mean, yeah, you can get into this minutia, but at the same time, the easiest thing is you got two categories of people: people who already know you, already buy your products, your services, people who don't know you. Okay, so when you're designing a website, people who already know you, they have certain number of questions that they need to ask you. Okay, and those questions are very actually few questions. They don't need to know about who you are. They don't need to know about what you do. They already know all this. They're already your customers. The only thing they really need to know is things like how to easily get a hold of you, how to easily get your product services purchased, with one or a couple of clicks, and obviously ability to easily contact you, things like that. So basically, that's all they really need to be able to go back and forth. They already know you. The category of people who you don't know and they don't know you yet, that's the bigger crowd, and that's the crowd you want to attract, because that's going to mean obviously more business. Okay, and so those people all come with a set of questions that you need to address on your website, such as you need to build some sort of credibility if you want to be able to have any possibility of them doing business with you, because they don't know you, they don't know anything about you, so you need to inform them. And that's where you have things like contact pages, you have things like about us pages, things like that. But if you drill it down to the very bottom, very core, like I said, of what it is, it's really nothing more than questions and answers. Okay, these people have questions for you, similar to when you get together, for example, with somebody you just met. What's the first thing you say? Hello, how are you? What's the next thing you say if you're standing in a conversation in a bar or in a party, at a party or whatever? What do you do? And things like that. And so those are the same kind of things you want to establish on your website. So it's almost like having a conversation without actually having one in real life, but you're trying to project the same thing. You're trying to get the same information relayed. So if you really drill it down to the very bottom, very core, I'll keep bringing that word up over and over. What you have is you have a set of questions, and you're looking for a set of answers. And that's precisely what FAQs are. They're a set of questions and set of answers. If you're looking at a website in terms of the existing pages, what kind of pages do people put on the website? Pages like Contact Us page. What is a Contact Us page? Obviously a way for people to be able to get a hold of you easily. But why do you put it on there? Because one of the typical questions is, okay, I'm ready to buy your stuff. How do I get a hold of you? How do I contact you? Okay, so because it's such a prevalent question, then it becomes its own page. And if you think about FAQ, frequently asked questions and answers, that's precisely what it is. There is a question of how do I get a hold of you? And the answer is, there it is. There's the phone number, there's the email, there's the potential contact form, map with driving directions, things like that. So it's nothing more than a question and an answer, just like frequently asked questions is a consolidated way to present a certain amount of information. So this is kind of my intro on the deal. And then before we get into problems with FAQ and more details, I'll let David talk for a few minutes and get some points in there too.
Well, I like the way you put that. I just posted on the event, all the content or the majority of the content within your site should be answering questions that your visitors have, or providing answers to questions that they don't know they have yet. It's all about that give and take of your visitors with you in some way, shape, or form. So what happens generally, you come to a website, they have the about page, their services page, these information pages that people are used to having on their websites. Then they get to the FAQ section where, they know that they need to answer specific questions because they get them all the time. They get people picking up the phone, calling them, emailing them, and asking these questions over and over again. So what do? They make a list of these questions and they shove them onto an FAQ page on their website. And then they put that in the footer. And then when they get those inquiries from now till doomsday, they say, oh, go to our FAQ page, and here it is. Here's the link to it. And I wrote about this in the blog post today. That's the way most people, unfortunately, think about their FAQ section. It is the junk drawer of the internet. It's the junk drawer of every website. If you don't know where to put it, we're going to stick it into the FAQ page. We're going to bury it on the footer. And like you said, all of your content in your website is answering a question of some sort. You know, they came looking for information. It's answering a question of some sort. So then it behooves us to really reconsider that FAQ section, because not only is it important information that you know your customers or your clients or your visitors are looking for, but it can also add in the capture strategy to get more visitors to your website if it's used properly. And that's kind of the interesting thing about it, is that, you know, I was chatting with David Emerlin about this, and you know, way back in the day, he wrote about in terms of the SEO benefit of FAQs, and there's tons of it. But then it just became this thing where people would cram lots of keywords and key phrases and just kind of data dump into the FAQ section, because they figured most human beings aren't going to read it. It's just there for good data purposes, but not for actually user purposes. So rethinking it in a modern sense, in a semantic search sense, makes so much sense now, because now you have a lot of people asking Google specific full phrase searches and looking for answers. And if you have an FAQ section that is asking those questions and answering those questions, you can bring people to your website and you can funnel them into your capture strategy. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is that you just have to rethink this great content that you have, that you probably already have in your website, or can start building out easily because you already know the content that you need to write. It's the stuff that people call you on all the time and ask you for all the time. Create FAQs. You know, it has this benefit to it. And I kind of thought of it over the last few days as this hidden treasure, because you literally buried it yourself in your website. You buried it in there. You gave people a sitemap to get to your FAQ section, and you forgot about it. You know, now you can go dig it up and repurpose it and make use of it again. And I have to give kudos to Aaron Wood, who designed the illustration in a very quick turnaround, because it perfectly illustrated what I was trying to get to. You know, that hidden treasure aspect of an FAQ section.
So is the pirate in the illustration, is that you basically? Is that was the concept?
No, I wish it was. He's got a little bit more hair than I do, but you know, every once in a while, it's good to think of yourself as a swashbuckler.
You can't really tell about the hat with the, you know, because of the hat, you can't really tell about the hair and everything. But I'm glad you said that it's not you, but then you said you wish it was you, and then I don't feel so good anymore. Because I was thinking, since both of us are doing this hangout, if you're the pirate, that means that little area where you have under the
you're the
shovel?
damsel?
No, the shovel. You know, that little elevation of ground under the shovel?
Yeah.
That must have been me underneath there then, since we're both doing the hangout. You're the pirate. Anyway, let's move on to the fact here. So let's go back to the very basics about the facts. And, you know, as you pointed out, there's definitely issues and problems with how people bury stuff, as you said, and how it is pretty much a hidden treasure. But at the same time, a lot of people, I think one of the main fallacies of the whole fact thing is that people don't set it up right in the beginning. It's not that just it's buried that's a problem. It's also how they set it up, regardless of the fact that it's very simple in terms of its idea and intent. The setup and the execution of it is completely incorrect. Like one of the examples you said, as you and David mentioned, about people just stuffing all kinds of keywords and phrases. You know, it goes back to when you talk to people about proper web design, they will always tell you, not only do you design your sites for your customers, for people who are going to come your audience, but it needs to be something addressing their needs. It's not just something you give them because you feel like that's what you want to give them, that's what they need to consume. You need to get it from their perspective in terms of what they actually need and what they actually want. The only problem is it's a kind of like a catch-22 situation. Because on one hand, you're trying to build something new, but it's something for them. So you'd like to ask them, what exactly do they want you to produce for them? The catch-22 part is they don't know. I mean, they may have some ideas here and there, but in terms of the actual result, in terms of functionality, and in terms of how it's going to, user interface, everything else, they can't give you any answers until they actually try it, until they use it. So that's where the catch-22 is. You're trying to build something that they would find useful and usable. You know, that's the end intent, but they cannot tell you anything at that point until it's actually built.
Well, I think it's important to remember that every business has a different situation for how much content and the types of content that they put into their FAQ. A medical equipment device manufacturer might have FAQs that are huge, where you're talking about diagrams and everything else in there. Whereas it might. I used the example earlier of a dentist's office might have each question and answer might be maybe a paragraph or two, and they might only have 10 questions in their FAQ versus 1,000. So there's a wide range of possibilities for how one can be designed and developed. But what you were saying is important, that you need to consider the user and how your end user is going to be using it and making use of it and being able to find the answers to their questions. It becomes important to look at how are they coming into the site. Where does the FAQ exist in their discovery through your website? Is it the landing page? Is it the middle, where they ended up coming from the home page, but they have a problem, so they then go to the FAQ and then they can't find anything in the FAQ, so they have to run a search in the FAQ. Where are they in the process also of finding the information that they're seeking? So there's a lot of considerations and a lot of variance between how your FAQ might be realized, but the end result needs to be a very usable section that allows people to easily find the answers to the questions that they have. And like I said also in my article, not just find the answers to their questions, but move them along in your capture strategy, where they go from, oh, well, I now have the answer to my question. Well, what's next? What do you do with them once you've answered their question? Do you get them to sign up to your mailing list or inquire because they found all their information, or move them to a product or a sales screen? What's the next step? And usually FAQs, just like everything else in this conversation, are kind of dead ends. They're buried dead ends right now. And
right.
They can be put to that greater purpose.
Right, but at the same time, you have, let's caution the folks here to be a little careful about that. You don't want to set up an FAQ where every single answer you give them has a sign up here or buy now or anything like that, because then you turn into a whole, some people will kind of cringe, just like, oh my God, it's a total sales job. I mean, all I was trying to do is get a simple answer, and they're trying to sell me or trying to give. So you need to be careful about. I do agree in terms of that concept being part of your thinking, but at the same time, do not set up an FAQ with 100 answers, and all of 100 answers, each one of them has some sort of action button on them telling you what to do next. I mean, to go, buy something. So it's an important point to remember, but in terms of how you design the site itself, I think you need to be cognizant of the fact that people do not like to be sold, they like to buy. So all of this need to be definitely part of the mix and how you put this together. And I realize some of the things I'm talking about here are, web design 101 type stuff, but I think it's important in the conversation of this whole FAQ thing, because if the point, as I was thinking about it, to me, it's almost like the entire website is nothing more than really a well-designed website is nothing more than an FAQ, because essentially people have certain questions and your website is supposed to give them the answers. So that's exactly the situation. You have the question, you have the answer, which is the crux of what a FAQ is. Yep. The only difference being that you can set up FAQ like I did, like you saw me do, we show a little demo there where you have just a bulleted list of questions. And David and I were looking at this one website the other day for, I think it was PCI compliance website, and David indicated that he doesn't like at all how they set it up, because they have a tremendous number of entries in there, and they're all in a really tiny print. So it ends up makes it a little bit hard to read. And for some people, most people do prefer larger print. So that's one problem with that kind of setup. And the reason, of course, they did it, which is one of the problems we're going to be discussing shortly here, is they tried to cram as much as possible. And that's going back to David's point about people cramming stuff. Anything that they don't find where it needs to go, they just drop it into FAQ and they bury it under a menu and submenu. And that's exactly.
And it wasn't just that, though. I mean, it was a lot of FAQs have, for example, they have a navigation up top, and then they drop you down on the page to sections. And at the end of each section, it bounces you back to the top to go to the next question, to bounce you back down the page. So you end up going zigzagging across, up and down the screen about 200 times. And that's not a good user experience. A good user experience guides you to, oh, well, if you came here for this question, you're probably interested in these other questions as well. What's the next step in what we think that you're looking for next? The worst thing we want to do is bring you back to the top so you start your exploration all over again. We want to guide you. We want to know, you asked this question. Well, generally speaking, people then follow up with these 2 other questions. So you probably want to look at those. Let's link to those specifically. And it doesn't always have to be a sales message, but that comes back to knowing your users and your audience and knowing the intent of the original query. If they came here looking for something specific and they got the answer, well, we know what they came here looking for because they ran a query. What's the natural next thing that they want to be doing or we want them to be doing? And people don't like to be oversold on things, but I think it's also fair to understand the intent of the query, answering that question, and then moving them into what is the natural next step.
Right. And I was actually going to make a point about the jumping up and down before it was so pleasantly interrupted. I figured that was one of the contention issues. But no, you're absolutely right, David. Of course. That definitely goes into the thinking part. The interesting thing about what David just said is that what you're looking to do is to try to get at some point in time to get your website to be much more intelligent in the way you set it up in terms of the flow of the entire experience of the user. Case in point, let's look at Amazon, for example. They're an excellent example of how things should be done, and the easiest way to say why it's the good example to use, look at their success rate. Obviously, they're doing something right if so many people like what they're doing. And of course, part of their huge success is their incredible customer service, which is a whole separate deal that we're not going to talk about today. But one of the things they did, continuing to what David was saying, is when you look at a book or you look at a product, any product, doesn't matter what it is, you can see they tell you people who bought this also bought this, and that. Mm-hmm. So you wind up, initially I was like, I don't really care what other people bought. I just need to buy this Ethernet router, for example. Wide router, not router, but switch or internet router, whatever.
But see, they know that you might 9 chances out of 10 need these other things because you bought this first thing.
Well, that's my point. If I'm buying this router and I'm going to hook it up, it's got an Ethernet port, then I might be needing to buy some Ethernet cables.
Yep.
And so that's exactly what they show, and that's exactly your point about how useful it is, because sometimes it's a convenience thing because I know I need to buy Ethernet cables, but a lot of times it's a discovery thing because I'm buying this router because my uncle told me I need to buy a wireless router. I had no idea I need to get a cable too, but they show you that people that usually buy this also buy these cables. So now there's a discovery point. I think I probably need to get these cables. It makes sense. So all of this is obviously an excellent way to, some of this that we're talking about is more of a website in general design and how you should think about it and how you should make your websites a lot more intelligent in terms of how they're presented to the user, the flow of how people move around them. And of course, you can take it to even the next level, which is what big websites do, like Amazon, is tracking everything and getting analytics. And David's going to talk a little bit more about that later, but about the analytics of what people are doing, how they're doing, to really give you a good inside look at exactly what your customers are doing for the most part. You got to remember that people are people. I keep saying it in a bunch of my posts and stuff. It's an unfortunate reality, but it's a reality nevertheless. There are different people. They do different things. They want different things. You ask 10 programmers on the street how to solve a problem, they're going to give you 10 different solutions. It's just the way it is. It's the way we are, basically, is what it is. And so when you're trying to come up with a solution that's going to be universal for all situations, you're not going to come up with it. There's no such thing, because there's always somebody who wants something different. So what you're trying to go for is something that will be, and that's one of the reasons the FAQs were created, is to take things that people ask the most. It's not answers to all the questions. It's answers to most frequent questions that are being asked, which is why it's called FAQ, frequently asked questions. And that's exactly what you're trying to do when you do the website, is to come up with things that most people might want, and then you deliver the answers for them. Okay? And one of the ways how you can deliver it is via a little piece of text. Certainly one way how you answer a question. Another way you can do it using a bunch of other things that, again, I want to bring up a little bit later in the deal. But one other thing would be something like David mentioned. You actually have a page, an entire page dedicated to that particular topic. It does have the SEO benefits, no question about that, if it's done right. But even more importantly than just SEO benefits is if you build the best SEO website out there, but you're not addressing the questions of your audience that comes to the website, it's useless. The fact that I rank #1 on Google, if nobody comes to my website, is irrelevant. The whole idea is for people to come, to consume, to interact, things like that. It's not just being placed on the first page of Google. I know that people think that if they're on the first page of Google, that means they're going to automatically get tons of business. That's not the case at all. I mean, you don't want to be ignorant of the point about being high on search engines and SEO and everything else. I mean, I'm not trying to discount it at all, but at the same time, your main thing that you're trying to accomplish as the end result of your website, if you just kind of peel all the layers away and look at the actual main thing, is you're trying to address questions, problems, issues, and just information dissemination of the audience that comes to your website, who hopefully will then become your clients if we're talking about business. So let's talk about the problems of FAQs. Why is it so difficult to set them up right, considering they're so simple? I have a list here I put together. So one of the things is, in terms of problems, is number of entries. As we were discussing, David mentioned that he didn't like the fact that they had tons of stuff over there, and of course they made it really tiny, makes it hard to read, and then it jumps all over the place all the time, and it's kind of, it jumps you right back to the beginning, so you can't really easily look at things that you're interested in. You're just jumping all over the place. And so the number of entries is definitely a problem in terms of how a lot of people do it wrong, like this particular site did. Second problem is size of the answer itself. Again, we alluded to the fact that sometimes you can have a whole page that's an answer, but sometimes you can have just a paragraph that will do the trick. So what's the right thing, what's the wrong thing? And of course it depends. The answer is it depends. But that's another problem that needs to be addressed, of how to come up with the effective FAQ. The next problem is SEO considerations. So that's where you have a whole page versus just having a one sentence type response. It makes a huge difference in terms of how well you can do SEO wise. And also the other problem is coming up with the actual questions and answers, as I mentioned earlier, about the fact that you really need to talk to people to find out what it is that they're interested in before you can give them the answers. And the catch-22 part is fairly easily resolved. If you design a website, do not design it as the end result. I mean, just always be thinking that it's something that's going to change. Just go with that, with that being the fact. And the idea is that you want to run it for maybe 3 to 6 months after you install it. You set up the analytics, you set up, you start talking to people, you're getting their feedback, and then you go with potentially a major rewrite because you didn't get a lot of things right. But to me, that's what I usually recommend to my clients, is when you initially design a website, do the best job you can in terms of talk to as many people as you can, use your own judgment, do whatever you can do, but go with the concept that you're going to come back in about 3 to 6 months later, talk to a lot of people who use it, and then redo the site to match their needs and wants better. What do you think, David?
No, it makes complete sense. And I think with every website, you should be doing that. It doesn't matter if you have a big website or a little website. After we launch a new website for our client, we set up a 3-month meeting usually, or we check in with our client a month or two down the road and just say, hey, let's follow up. Let's see how everything's working. Let's go through your analytics. Let's actually make sure. Because things change, especially if you have a client that's actively adding content. The original information architecture that you've set up is going to have to evolve unless the website stays the way it is, which is probably, in many cases, a 5 to 10 page website. But if it's not the case, then yeah, you're going to have blog posts. You're going to have categorization of blog posts. You're going to have an FAQ that's growing. It's a good website never stays stagnant in its architecture. It has to evolve, and you should be using in data mining to see, where people are coming in from, for example, where your landing pages are and how are you moving them. And you might find that also by going back up to Webmaster Tools, for example, you might start seeing the questions, the specific questions that people are asking that are bringing them to your content, whether it's a blog post or a page. You might actually be seeing and benefiting from those frequently asked questions before you even have a frequently asked questions section in your website. They might be asking those questions and you happen to show up as the first answer. Boom. Not only that, but if you open your Webmaster Tools and you notice this, now you know even better, hey, I should write something about this. I should answer this question because obviously it is a frequently asked question. And if you're already ranking for it, even better, because you can expand it outwards. You can start linking to other content, which is kind of the nice thing about it, and start building out that FAQ section, which then has that benefit of attracting more traffic. But yeah, I think it comes down to a good amount of forethought, which doesn't always happen with a lot of web development firms, and a good amount of knowing that you need to stay on top of this and come back to it and look at the navigation and make sure it's working for you and making sure it's working for your end user.
Yeah, and like you said, the concept of people building a website and just leaving it in place, a lot of people do it, but it's a completely wrong approach. It needs to be a living, breathing thing from the standpoint of your business evolves, this should evolve with it, just like you said. But more importantly, you need to consider the fact that you want people to come back, okay? So if you have a website that sells products, or it could sell services, and they need to come to it to consume all the time, the people who are existing customers, they're definitely going to keep doing it. They know this is, like I have a system I wrote for online ordering from restaurants. So of course people come to my website all the time and they order food all the time because that's the nature of the site. But in terms of other websites that are what they call brochureware sites, meaning that you just have like a brochure on the web about talking about whatever you do, the company, stuff like that, they just kind of leave it in place, and it winds up being very much outdated, which means that if somebody comes now and then somebody comes a week from now, and then they come back from a month from now, if they see the same content, they're not coming back again. They've already consumed it. They know what it is. Why would they come back? So you need to have this level of quote-unquote freshness in the website, and it's not just some fluff. It needs to be something relevant, but it needs to be something as the business evolves. It doesn't stay, so the website needs to as well. And that's going to have people coming back, and of course, this is going to have the benefits of them coming back as well. One of the things I was thinking this morning is that if you think about search engines, and you think about when you type something in Google, you get a result back with the most relevant links to the answers of what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like it's a fact right there, too. If you think about it, the search is kind of like a fact type scenario, because you type in some kind of question, and then it comes back with a list of things that you can jump to be able to get the answers.
Yeah, and if you can start matching up some of the content you're writing with the questions that they're asking, even better. It makes it so Google has to do less thinking to get to you being the best answer.
Exactly.
Which plays into the answer box that we start seeing more and more of. Google showing answer boxes, and you can format it so you can take advantage of that. But even just from a good search content standpoint, it just makes sense to write to the content that people are searching for as it relates to your business. And not just the things that are the problems, but also the like I said earlier, the questions that people might not know how to answer or ask those questions. Preempt their question with content.
Right.
Which is a good strategy also. Just, oh, hey, how does this relate to this? Bring them in, answer the question, and move them along. And
so the main point we're trying to make here collectively with David is that try to think of your website as a glorified FAQ. That's one thing. And at least, David, you can disagree with me if you disagree with this point, and meaning that it's basically a vehicle for producing answers, okay? And then the questions themselves need to be both embedded at some point into the website, where you're either guiding the users into the question and giving them the answer, kind of, taking somebody's food and chewing them for them, if you will. And then at the same time, maybe they will see the question they're looking for, or they want to select the question they're looking for, and then they get the answer. And the answers might be, like I said, the size may differ and the medium may differ, because sometimes it could be text, sometimes it could be video, sometimes it could be audio, sometimes it could be a link, sometimes it could be a link to a different place on the same page. It could be a link to a different page. It could be a link to a different website. I mean, there's all these possibilities that are all possible to do in a single environment, which is your website, or a glorified frequently asked question, which is, to me, it's just the easiest way to think of it this way. If you're trying to do a website, think about what you're trying to address in terms of problems for people and give them the answers, because that's what they're looking for. That's why they come to your website. They're not coming to your website for just saying, hi, how are you today? They do that on Facebook, and they do that in Google Plus, and on Twitter, everything else. This is where they come to resolve their problems, whatever they might be, or to find out something about you, to give you business and consume your services, things like that. So that's how you can. To me, it's an easy way to address it. But just think of your website as the FAQ in a much more glorified, abstract way.
So I would expand that. I would expand that conceptually and say, not only is it a glorified FAQ, but that at the end of that FAQ, there has to be goal conversions. And I talk about this in a lot of my writing, but a goal conversion for the end user and your business. They came with a question. You want to give them the answer to that question and get that goal conversion. Whatever that goal is that they've set out for, and whatever goal that you've set out for them, you need to get that goal conversion, and however that relates to your business. It's not just, here's the answer. It has to be that next step. There has to be something else after it. Otherwise, you might as well just be Wikipedia. And you're not Wikipedia. If you're a business and you have a website, you have a goal to do. You have a business to accomplish. So there should be a goal conversion at the end of the day.
Okay. All right. So I'll concede that point to David. He mentioned it several times. I can't argue with that anymore. But at the same time, I will say, just be cautious about being too salesy, because if you come across as too salesy with some people, yours truly here too, is you're losing them.
It doesn't always need to be a sales message. It could be, if a person that's coming because they needed tech support for a product, well, why not get them to register in your site so that you can follow up whenever there's a bug patch or something along those lines. It can be something that's in their best interest as well. It doesn't always have to be sales related, but just something that you can keep them apprised of the situation. Right. You can tell them when the next version of this product comes out, something. You're not just necessarily selling.
All right. So do you guys now understand why David gets a lot more conversions on his websites than I do? That's why. All right. So
the next step. There's got to be a next step. What's that next step going to be?
All right. Next step here in this conversation is going to be about the actual specifics. Now we kind of, identified what frequently asked questions are. Thinking about the website in that regard is kind of a good way to look at it too. And then identifying the fact that there's different ways to build it, different ways to address it. That's when I want to go into more specifics here. And of course, we want to make sure we do not forget the next steps as part of it, as David mentioned, so people are guided in the right way, not just given information as the Wikipedia does. So in terms of, let's talk first about some of the ways to address things based on specific examples. If you do have a short list of questions, let's say you have 10 questions and answers, you polish shoes. That's all you do, okay? There's not that many questions that people are going to ask you. Let's say you did a website where you polish shoes. It's not going to have a tremendous number of questions, okay? So if you have something where you're putting in a short, frequently asked question page, and the reason you want to do this, by the way, I want to bring up that point also, I think is important, is that many people know what FAQ is. Many people don't, but many do. A lot of people do. FAQ started way back in the days of early internet use on Usenet. That's when the whole thing started, back in the 80s. And a lot of people, since they learned what FAQ stands for, what it's used for, things like that. Okay, so people know what FAQ is. So you can use it as a magnet, if you will, because people automatically look at FAQ as something they might want to look at. Like I said, it's almost like a magnet to me in terms of pages, because the other pages are Some are fairly intuitive. I mean, if I'm trying to contact somebody, I'm looking for the contact us button or contact button. I mean, that's pretty intuitive. But in terms of a bunch of other things, it's not intuitive. Okay, I don't know where they put the stuff on the site, especially if it has a lot of navigation, a lot of pages. I have no idea where to find it. Okay, if I do a search, it's one way to do it if the site provides it. A lot of sites don't even provide search. But if they do, then again, it gives me a list of things, not a specific thing that I'm addressing potentially. And may not be, the search may not be relevant in terms of relevancy, not high up there either. So that really doesn't address the issue. What addresses the issue? FAQs. So when I go to an FAQ page, then I may find exactly what I'm looking for, and then I click on it, and there is the answer. So perfect. Okay, you definitely want to do FAQ. But at the same time, if it's short, if it's the FAQ, it has few questions, then you can put it together like I showed you earlier, where you just have a way to click on something. And then one way to do it is you can have an accordion type design, where you have basically a section of the screen opens up under the question, and there's the answer. And then when you click on another question, it folds back up again, and you have the answer that way. This is good for short amount of content. If it's a long amount of content, it doesn't work. Short amount of answers, it works fine. Another possibility is that website that we talked about earlier with tons of entries. If you only have 10, that would work pretty well in terms of just you click on something, it drops to the lower in the page. So you have questions at the top, and then you have all the answers at the bottom. And so when you click on the top question, it just jumps right on the screen to where the answer is. So if you don't have a lot of questions, then this would be an acceptable approach. Just don't make the text too small to text them in, and don't make it, if you have, like I said, a lot more than just a few, it's going to be jumping, and then David will never come to your website, guaranteed. So you don't want to be doing that.
Don't do that.
So then the next thing that you could be doing is you could be doing, like I showed you, video. And I think video is something that should be definitely considered very heavily from several standpoints. Number one is, when you're talking about video, is the most popular format for consumption out there by people. YouTube is #2 search engine in the world for a reason. And my kids spend a ton of time on YouTube. Also there is a reason for that. So YouTube is excellent for SEO, number one. I know it's, for a lot of people, it's a dreaded word, but it's it's an important part of the overall online presence in today's world. So you need to be cognizant of that, and definitely having YouTube videos with properly set up tags and things like that, descriptions, definitely very helpful. And on top of that, forget about SEO, it's extremely helpful in terms of what you're providing. Case in point, I go to one of my clients in Idaho. It's a resort company. It's, fairly long flight, driving at night, snow, ice, all that. I'm totally dead tired by the time I get to the condo. I get to the condo, beautiful 2,000 square foot condo. I love it. I'm dying of, I want to drink, I want to eat. There's nothing to eat. It's late. There's a coffee maker. I want to make some coffee. Okay. So what are my choices? I open up this 50-page guide that they have, the printed guide in the room that talks about everything and anything. Takes me a couple of minutes to find the silly coffee instructions in the first place. I find it. They're making some mentions of some names of parts of the coffee maker. I don't know. I'm one of these damn foreigners. My English is not as good as some other people. I don't know. Okay? So not only am I irritated because I'm tired, but I'm also irritated because I don't know how to make the coffee thing properly. So I'm trying to find out what they're talking about. There's no illustrations of any kind, just words. I basically yank, long story short, I break the coffee maker. I don't make any coffee. I'm irritated beyond, this is a family show. I'm not going to say what I really wanted to say here. But it just, what should they have done? What they should have done, and have a small intranet, meaning just for people at the resort, or just have it on the internet as a website, and have this list of these frequently asked questions, one of which, coffee maker is one of the amenities. You got coffee maker, you got the fridge, you have the stove. This is the common stuff that every practical place like this has. Have a button, how to make a cup of coffee. You click on it, it opens up a video that takes about 1 minute to show me, not tell me, show me exactly how to make that cup of coffee. And I'm set. They don't have a broken coffee maker in the morning. I'm extremely happy and caffeinated, and there we go. So to me, those are the kind of examples where it makes a lot of sense to use video. And this is an example, real-life example of how video could have solved that problem. David, what's your take on the video use in fax?
You have some crazy FAQ stories, man.
All true.
I go for simple. I go for making it simple and stupid. And assume that nobody wants to try too hard to find the answer. And however you can best do it to get that accomplished is often the best way. So, for example, if I owned the resort that you were at, I would have a postcard, that's hanging on the back of the coffee maker with instructions. Nothing technological, just a postcard. You put a filter in, you put in 5 scoops of coffee, you fill it with water, you hit start. Keep it simple. I'm a big fan of keeping it simple and not trying to overdo a system if it's not necessary. Because I feel like
I have to interrupt here because this is go against the grain there. I have to interrupt. So, folks, David comes in from more a business, personal type experience with people. I come from IT, where efficiency to me is gold. Okay, so efficiency has to be nice.
We can have a throwdown on that issue because most IT people that I know like to overcomplicate every situation.
Okay, but I'm also a user. In this case, I'm a user. So here's how I take care of David's problem with a better solution. What you do is you have a QR code on the same wall that he was talking about, and then you click on that QR code. You scan it with your phone, and it drops you into the video that I was talking about, okay? That's simple. Everybody has phones. Scanning is simple. Application is free. You get to the video because it's much, much better than just a little bit of text. Like I said, I had the text, David, and I could not figure out what it meant. So without illustrations, and if you're thinking about a place like a hotel or a condo, how many of these little pieces of paper with instructions printed on them, how much room are they going to eat up, and how crappy is it going to look in terms of overall look?
I'm just waiting for the 70-year-old man who doesn't have a cell phone, has no idea what a QR code is, can't figure out how to get onto the internet, and it's like, what is this newfangled thing that you're talking about here?
Okay.
But the lowest common denominator is he can pick up a card and read it. Maybe it needs diagrams, IKEA style. But I think we can get to that resolution a little bit easier, which I think which brings us back to FAQs oftentimes are not necessarily thought out for the target audience or the most common audience. That they're thought out in a way that might have made sense to the developer, might have made sense to the business owner, but makes no sense whatsoever to the end user. The little old man who barely figures out how to get onto the internet because he's using Internet Explorer 7 still, or 6. Oh God, if he's using 6, God help him. But you know what I'm saying? Like, what's the lowest common denominator? And that's something that most people haven't really thought about. That they're wrapped up in their own brain about what they want to see, as opposed to what the end user needs to see and how the end user needs to interact and find the answers to their questions.
Right, and we talked about that you need to talk to the end user. That's all fine and good. The 70-year-old, by the way, unfortunately, just folks so you know, that 70-year-old man already passed away because he was kind of
because he didn't have coffee.
We don't need to worry about him. But realistically speaking, though, you need to make some sort of a call in terms of the relevance of the audience you're addressing, because like David said, we do have at that resort plenty of people who come in who are kind of on the late side of life, and they do have the problems like he described. So we will have that. But if you go for the lowest common denominator, then it's basically people who don't use computers. It's people who do not use phones. You just can't be designing websites for those kind of people in mind. It has to be some crowds you're not going to address. There's no two ways about it. So we're talking about computer people that if we're talking about FAQs, we're talking about people accessing stuff on the web and being able to get to, they're able to click. They're not all too old to click and stuff like that. So let's just stick with that. Let's not go for the lowest common denominator, because then you're really eliminating the whole coolness of the whole thing, if that's the case. Okay? So I'm just saying that you can address the FAQ thing with something like a QR code, which can be a link from the website, from the FAQ list, that goes directly also to this video. And I think that's one of the ways how the answer can be given on an FAQ. Another way how you can do the answer is, we talked about text. If you don't have too many entries and they all can be text and they describe sufficiently the answer, that's another way to do it. Another way to do it would be to have, if you think about intranet, which is the internet site internal for a particular company. Perfect example comes to my mind is my wife works for AT&T, and she's got, they have 250,000, I believe, employees. If you're trying to design something for that many people, and you're trying to come up with FAQ page for them inside the company, it would be a major undertaking, okay, to do something like, and they have one, by the way. They have one. So this is, I'm specifically using extremes here. We went from, the 70-year-old guy, may he rest in peace, who couldn't use the QR code, and then we have people with 250,000 people company that needs to have some sort of FAQ presence for their internal communications, of being able to give answers to people, stuff like that. So there is a wide gap between them, and that's what you need to address in terms of your solutions and in terms of your particular situation, how many people you're serving. So in terms of the, let's talk a little bit about the size of the answers and the kind of answers. So we talked about text, we talked about video. Do you agree, David, though, that video is in many cases a much better solution than just text alone?
No, video is great. Video is one of those things that, if possible or when possible, use it. I think that unfortunately it's out of the realm of budgets for most businesses that use it or that should be using it. But, it's one of those things that you could definitely repackage in different ways and find more uses for than simply being part of your FAQ.
But don't you agree that, I realize you're talking about, budgets being a sensitive issue. I, don't necessarily disagree 100%. But if you think about what we have these days, where you can have one of these little guys right here, which everybody carries, it has pretty good video capabilities built in. Couldn't you have an employee at that resort just stop by for 2 minutes, hit the video button, record and narrate whatever they're doing with the cup of coffee, and just use that? That doesn't take much money.
There's definitely possibilities. There's definitely ways to work around all kinds of situations. I'm just saying, in most cases, people like to look at it and go, I need some professional video for whatever this is. And yeah, there's alternatives. And I think you need to be cognizant of those things, but at the same time, yeah, when possible, video is great. And like I said, it can have other advantages as you reuse it, whether it's in a blog post or other places as well. So yeah, do it if you can. Exactly. Nothing better than visually showing someone how to accomplish something.
At the same time, if you're going to have a simple answer that you can put in a paragraph, do not make a video out of it. It takes a certain amount of time for people to bring up video, look at it, and everything else. And so if the question is pretty simple and the answer is simple, don't just go with the idea that I'm going to create videos for everything because it's so cool and so on. So it's not. You're disservicing people instead of servicing them, in my opinion, because they're trying to get the answer quickly. And that's another point David Amberlin actually made a couple of days ago in one of his hangouts. He talked about everybody's pressed for time. And it's true. All of us are pressed for time all the time. So the solutions people are looking for need to be plentiful enough for what they need to get, but at the same time as concise as possible. That's always should be the consideration. And that takes us back to the facts, where you have a fact set up with a question, and then you have this long-winded answer, and then a question, a long-winded answer. And sometimes you have a page that says fact, and there's another page that says more fact, and things like that. Fact number 2 and fact number 3. And so I think
you're picking on my client now. Yeah.
No, well, you said it. I didn't say that. And so, and for that, I would say that I don't think it's such a great way to do it, because it makes it difficult for people to even get to these questions. And what you want with fact, the whole idea is to get the questions quickly, scan through them, which means don't have 1,000 of them, and then click on the one you want to get the answer you want as quickly as possible using whatever medium. So if it makes sense, if you need to have a lot of content on the back end in terms of answer, then either you go to a page, kind of like what I was showing you in the beginning. I was going to a totally separate page on display. It only had one short answer, which I just said don't do that kind of stuff with separate pages. But if you have a long answer, then it makes perfect sense to drop from a short list of things that you're looking at to go to a page describing specifically. You're kind of drilling down. Just don't set up this drill down process to go 10 levels deep.
Well, hold on. Let me actually, I'm going to pull up the page, because I think it's important to give a difference between, a large FAQ and a small FAQ. And, think about how an FAQ can be worked into the greater sales messaging, perhaps. And so this is one of my clients, interim programs. The second page up in their navigation is their gap year FAQ, which is what we're on right now. And on it, they start walking through those common questions. What is a gap year? They give 2 short paragraphs. Moving on to the next question, who takes a gap year? They link to other things. When do people take a gap year? How and where do people spend their gap year? They're linking out. And at the bottom, we're only talking about 4 or 5 questions. At the bottom, what other questions do you have? They're moving you onto the more FAQ, which you just referenced, but also the facts and figures, the testimonials, and the nice big call to action. So we're always moving someone into that sales funnel while we're answering the questions that they have. It's part of that strategy of answering the questions and moving them through. And I think that that's how you can do it successfully without overwhelming them, because they came here for that kind of content. They came here with questions, you're answering them, and now here's how you fulfill that question. So okay. I think it's a fair thing, and like I said, this is a short FAQ. It didn't need to have a larger navigation. It was only 4 questions. Maybe.
No, but it also has a more FAQ because clearly there were some additional questions. It wasn't just these.
That's true. But it does the same thing that the first one does, but also knowing that those were the primary questions that most people are answering.
But that's exactly what David Amerland, the other day was pointing out, that's exactly, in his opinion, and I totally agree with him, is not necessarily the best way for everybody. Some people like to read stuff and they kind of go through and they see and they get an answer they want. But the whole idea with the FAQ here is to get to an answer you want quickly. And if you just have this flowing thing of question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, I don't know at which point the specific answer I'm looking for will be, which means it's going to take me a long time to get to it, which means they lost me. I'm not going to be, as soon as I'm looking at the page with all this content where I just wanted to get a simple answer, they just lost me. So I will respectfully disagree that this is the ideal way to do it, because with some people...
No, it's not the ideal. What I'm saying more is more along the lines of you need to look at your questions and answers in the context of how you're presenting content, how many questions, how much content you have, and what the best way is to present it to your target audience. Because that's what's important at the end of the day, is presenting the content in the best way to the target audience, but also accomplishing your goals for it. And yeah, it doesn't allow someone to jump to the question to get their answer. It's a presentation. It's part of a presentation. It doesn't always have to be quick in, quick out. It can be a greater... I don't
know. I'm going to have to disagree here completely. The whole idea of FAQ is to get quickly in and out. That's, it's just, I think that was the whole idea behind the deal, is instead of people answering same things all over the place 100 times, you just have this one short list, and then you just simply go ahead and jump right to the question you wanted. That was the whole idea behind it.
I think, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, is that I think you need to take that to the next more modern level and say, how does this actually fit into my content dissemination strategy? How does this fit into my audience strategy? How does this fit into my semantic search strategy? How does this fit into my capture strategy? And how does it all relate to my goals of answering the questions that my target audience has and is coming to my site with?
I heard the word "my" many times, but I heard target audience only once. And so this is where you need to look at it from, are you doing it based on what you're trying to accomplish as a business, or are you trying to come up with something that will be useful and positive for your audience? I mean, because those two are not necessarily congruent all the time.
Well, they should be.
But they're not.
But so here becomes the problem of, are you a business or are you Wikipedia? You're a business with a mission. You're trying to either sell more widgets.
But what I'm saying, David, and don't get me wrong, let's not start throwing pies here. What I'm saying is, I came to get a simple answer. You're guiding me through an entire process and then trying to sell me at the end. That's not what I came for. So.
Well, no, and that's fair. That's when I have to know why you came. What did you come looking for? I've talked about this before in terms of determining the intent of the query. You have to know the intent of the query and how to best relate to that intent. And yes, some questions are better answered and better served by having a quick in and out. But not all questions need to be that way, and not all
Well,
questions.
let's go back to the resort example. They did have this 50-page book, and they did have things about the stove and about this and about that and about everything was in that book. So if you think about it, it's no different than the page you just showed, where they were showing information, and I had to read through all these pages one at a time until I came to information about the coffee pot.
Then their user experience for their FAQ was poorly done, because they didn't understand who you were and what you were coming looking for. You know,
no, but
they should
what I'm telling you is that
you to jump to that.
But the experience that you're showing in that web page is exactly the same experience. I'm starting at the beginning. I don't have a list of things that you're going to answer, so I have to read through all this stuff, which means I'm going to have to take a bunch of time, which means it's time that I don't want to take. You know, you're not addressing my needs here.
But it's the experience as it relates to your content and your target audience. That's the difference.
I am the target audience, and I'm saying I don't like it.
If you were there and you didn't know anything about a gap year, and you said, teach me about a gap year, I have questions, you would go to the gap year FAQ and you would start reading down the page.
But I would actually like to, true, I could, if I wanted to get that kind of information, I agree. It's like reading a PDF on the subject. So but I also to come and ask a specific question, something to do with the gap year, that I don't want to go through everything. I just want to have a list of all gap year related topics and jump quickly to that.
I agree. I think that there are plenty of cases. And I think in this case, I think they did it right with the first page, because they're educating people about what a gap year is by walking them through the common questions.
Okay.
And if you had never heard about a gap year, that's what you would do. You would go to the gap year FAQ and you would start reading down the page, at which point that FAQ page has accomplished its goal because it's educating you about it. And if you know about a gap year, you would be going and finding out specific questions and querying for specific questions, at which point I agree that the back end of that, their greater, more detailed FAQ should be handled a little bit differently. But at the same time, I know that they're more interested in you going into the inquiry there rather than seeing those questions specifically put out there.
Okay, so I personally, I disagree. Oh, wait a minute. Did you say they're your client?
They are my client, yes.
Okay, I totally agree. In that case, I completely and totally agree. Okay, so let's move on. So what other methods? So we talked about short text. We talked about potentially because of SEO and otherwise we have more information going to long text. We talked about. I still think, like I said, my personal recommendation is have the list clickable to go to. If you need to go to another page, that's fine. The other thing you could do, which a lot of people don't even talk about, think about, or even know exists, is email on demand. I had a HOA not long ago about this particular topic, where you can easily set up Gmail is the easiest thing to do. You just set up a Gmail account, and you can use a combination of filters and canned messages to come up with an email on demand type environment, where somebody sends you an email, and then in response they get some sort of a text-based email back, which is email on demand. If you think about it from the FAQ standpoint, then it has multiple benefits in my view, because one of the things that people, if you go back to sales history on the web early, there was a tremendous amount of spamming going on, and everybody hated it. People just spam, buy. So people hated it. That didn't work very well. So then next phase that came in was opt-in, as they call it, meaning people would set up with so-called squeeze pages, where you put in your name and email address, and then once you hit submit, then they capture information and then either take you to the next page or send you a free PDF or register you for a webinar, whatever the case may be. But it was a deal where they would capture your contact information that way. That only had a reasonable amount of benefit compared to the old spam approach. And so people went into the next step, which wound up being what they call double opt-in. And double opt-in simply means that you have a squeeze page as before, but when people submit it, then an email is sent to the recipient based on whatever they indicated in the little opt-in form, and then the person had to actually reply or click on a link in that email indicating that they acknowledge they do want this, whatever that is. I'll have to check with Bill Clinton on that part, but whatever it was, they need to acknowledge it, and then they get whatever they're going to get, or go to the page they want to get, the PDF or book or whatever it is. So that one, that being, people have to click 2 different times to indicate they really want it. The reason this was set up and the reason it works so well is because if you read something by Robert Cialdini, phenomenal book on marketing and personal psychology, he'll tell you, there's things such as reciprocity that plays a big part. If David does something for me, I feel compelled to do something for him in return, even though he didn't do anything for me because he wanted me to do something back. It's just the way we usually feel on a human level. So it's a normal thing. Second thing, so in other words, if I'm clicking, if somebody's giving me something and I'm clicking to say yes, thank you, or whatever, then I'm reciprocating in a way, and I'm becoming more kind of in tune with the person, getting more engagement, getting closer. So there is a much better possibility of sale. And they set up these funnels where you get, you send email to a ton of people, then out of those, so many will respond to whatever your offer is, and then you wind up with a smaller funnel, and then those you give them something else for free, or some kind of product smaller. So that's kind of the sales cycle that a lot of people use on the internet. But let's bring it back to the FAQ situation and what I'm talking about. If you do these email on demands, like I was talking about, then what you're doing is you're essentially doing an equivalent of an opt-in, because people have to actually click on a button, and then it comes up with their email interface with email already filled in. All they have to do is click on send, but they actually need to do the clicking, which means that if they don't want this, there's no way they can accidentally do it, is my point. And so you accomplish 2 things. Number one, you accomplish the fact of trying to start this interaction, this transaction, whatever it might be. And number 2, you're verifying their email. You're getting their actual email address because it automatically comes from their email. So you're actually accomplishing the opt-in situation without doing the opt-in. All they need to do is click on a link, which could be part of your frequently asked questions. And it automatically fires off the interface. They click send. It sends you an email. On your end, the scan message automatically goes out with the response, and now you have their email. You can start talking to them, and so on and so forth. So there is the next action type possibility that David was alluding to in terms of doing it using this kind of unique approach of email on demand, but it accomplishes the same result. And so there's different ways. I just want to make sure that people understand that there's different ways to address the answer part of the question. The questions are always text. I mean, they normally wouldn't be anything else. But the answer is what you can do with video, with short text, with whole pages, with these email on demands, with even example I did earlier for you. I set up a Google presentation that worked like an FAQ type environment, right? So you can even do that kind of stuff where you can embed a Google presentation on your website or your blog, and then that presentation will have a bunch of questions, and then the answers will be part of that, which could include videos, could include images, could include all kinds of stuff. So there's a tremendous amount of variety of possibilities of how you can answer your questions and address the issue with screen real estate, because that's one of the problems with addressing now a lot of different frequently asked questions is how do you manage the screen real estate? There's only so much room. There's only so much you can do. And that's exactly where David and that client of his, he had the FAQ broken down into 2 FAQs because it would be way too long to be on one page. And you can have web pages 10 miles long if you want it, but nobody's going to read through them because according to statistics, about I think it was like 60% or something of people don't look below the fold, as they call it. Meaning they don't scroll the page, they just look at whatever they can see and they're done. So a lot of people design websites to make sure that the information is up at the top of the page. Most important stuff comes there, and then from there, if people need to scroll, they will scroll. But a lot of people don't even bother to scroll, so they may never even see these footers that people put in with FAQs on it. So I think it's important to also remember that kind of dynamic that goes into each web page. And some people use menus to alleviate the problem with screen real estate, where they can package a lot of options, a lot of capabilities for navigation. The problem with that approach is, like David pointed out in the beginning, it gets buried. It gets buried where you cannot intuitively see options on the screen, which means that people will have to hunt for them, and people are not going to be hunting for them. So if you put your FAQ somewhere, no matter how well you design it, how well it works, how much information, it's irrelevant. If you hide it into some menu, submenu, a lot of people, most people, will never get to see it. So it's important to make sure that it's very prominent. David, what do you think about all of that?
Wow, that was a lot of stuff.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, we've talked around it, multiple times, but you have to know and understand what you're presenting and where you're presenting it and how you want to present it best. I write about it often that it really comes down to knowing your audience. Even some of the things like above the fold and below the fold, which is something that Dustin Stout, for example, and I have gotten to heated arguments about, and I can show, that most people scroll or then most people don't scroll. It all depends. It really all depends on your presentation. There's no hard and fast rules that apply to all websites across the board for all situations. It really does come down to you having to know who your audience is and what the best way is to present your content, that you need to present it to the people that your audience are and their capabilities. Whether it's 50% of them are on mobile. So how are you going to present your FAQ best to a mobile user versus a desktop user? You might be in a business where 95% of your users are on desktop and barely any on mobile. It's all, there's so many variables in it. I think the only common part across the board is that you have to make the most user-friendly presentation of your content possible and the most navigable presentation of that content for how long or how short that content is and how best to accomplish the goals for that content. I think I was recently talking to someone and about a restaurant in particular, and they still put up their menu as a PDF, and not just a PDF, but a PDF that goes both directions. So when you're viewing this PDF on your cell phone, you actually need to scroll to the right to see the second column, and then you need to scroll down to see the bottom quadrant. You can't just pick and zoom. And it's amazing that they're still doing their menu as a PDF, but that it's a poorly designed PDF. Whereas now, in the modern way, you would probably present your menu as text, where it automatically, resizes as a responsive web design. And that comes back to the user interface and making your user interface work for your content and work for your users. And all the forethought that goes into that. And that's what it comes down to, again, is planning and forethought and strategy of understanding who your users are, understanding your content, understanding the goals for the content. There's a lot of forethought that goes into it. It's not just here, I'm going to slap something together and then stick it in the junk drawer. There has to be forethought to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically in the end here, because we're a little bit beyond our 30 minutes here.
A little?
Just a tiny bit. The bottom line is that it's important to, number one, is to come up with a good strategy. In other words, if you understand that you're trying to provide value and service, good value and good service to your audience, whatever that audience is, you need to understand who they are, knowing ahead of time that you may only find that out after you build something. So you do the best you can in the beginning, then you augment it as needed later. And at the same time, you address their needs in the easiest for them, most meaningful way for them. So that's your main driving factor in terms of what your main intent should be. And at the same time, you're putting in information there that when we're talking about frequently asked questions, we're not talking about just regular web pages here. We're talking about the FAQ itself. Then the idea is to have a set of questions presented in some sort of nice to look at, easy to navigate, easy to use manner, with the answers being a plethora of text, videos, long text, pages, blog posts, forums,
whatever's valuable.
Twitter, whatever it makes sense to that answers that question, then that's what you would use for properly answering it. So that's that. And then at the same time, also you need to look at your FAQ as being something that's important part of the whole site, otherwise don't have one. And when it's important part of your site, that it needs to be visible. So do not stick it at the footer in a tiny print just to make it be there. Do not put it under some sort of a menu with a sub menu that has 15 different items on it. Don't. Try to make your websites as flat as possible, meaning 1-2 clicks access at most. Try to avoid using menus if you can, because there's definitely ways to design websites without using any menus. That way, everything visible, available to the users is right there in front of their face. They know exactly what to click on. They don't need to be looking for information. They actually have it accessible with a single click. That's the ideal situation. If your FAQ presents a lot of very valuable information for most of the people, make sure it's easily accessible, visible. In other words, not just another page, but make it stand out somewhat by having it be written in bigger text, or somehow, accent it out, just like you make your phone numbers usually on the website be bigger because you want people to respond by making phone calls to you. And so you're trying to make it more prominent.
Don't hide it. Make it accessible.
Exactly. Make it that's the, that part is just as important, even though this is much easier to do than creating a good FAQ and having it available, because if you make the best FAQ and people can't find it, it's useless. So with that, I want to thank immensely David Kutcher for being with me today. Definitely has been an interesting and I think useful conversation. I'm going to bring up this page here. So David, why don't you, if you don't mind, tell the folks how they can hire Confluent Forms, you specifically, and how they go about it, and whatever you want to bring up about that.
There you go. There's our URL, confluentforms.com. Check us out. You'll find, if you visit the page, there's a little chat box in the bottom right, which directly connects to me. A phone number in the top right, email box. Just get in contact. You can find me on Google+. I'm always here, always chatting it up. And thank you, Oleg, for actually our first time in a video together.
Exactly. True. Yeah. Same here. Thank you very much. And so, you can contact me also, similarly to David, from the website or from Google+. That's where I usually park. And basically, David, you don't only deal with clients in your immediate area. I'm assuming you've got clients all over the place.
Oh, I've got clients everywhere. Clients everywhere.
So David is accessible to everybody. If your client happens to be speaking Russian and David can help you, then you can just.
Then I will definitely recommend you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, the Russian thing not going to happen, but thank you.
Okay. Yep, and basically we will try to do whatever we can to take care of your needs. Like I said, my approach is a lot more from a computer standpoint, IT standpoint. So that's how I usually try to drive my stuff. David's is a lot more
strategic
approach.
You called it.
Business strategic. It's not just strategic. It's basically business strategic. Using the business end of it as the most important. And so, one of the hangouts actually that's coming up, if you're interested, I'm going to be doing a hangout with David Amerland and Gina Fidel about efficiency and humanity, or mix of the two, I should say, because there are people out there such as myself who are big believers in technology, solving a lot of business problems, making businesses essentially. My mantra is this: that we only have 24 hours a day, and there's no way to expand that. I mean, that's all we have, and we have to get everything done. Whatever everything is, it needs to be done, or it doesn't get done. Those are the only two options. So the only way I see how a business can succeed without spending more money and getting more people and everything else to expand and to be able to do more with less, if you will, is to use technology, because technology is a huge efficiency vehicle if it's done correctly and if it's done with the proper tools and proper execution. And so that's the kind of camp I come from. And I got slammed, stoned to death basically in one of the posts not too long ago by people saying that no, we want to use paper notes. There's nothing, go away with your little Google Keep things and things like that. Don't, that's the wrong approach. And so you get into these heated arguments with people that accuse you of all kinds of stuff you didn't mean to say, and that you just don't get it and everything else. I get it just like the next person. I'm just saying that from my perspective, being in IT, I think time can be saved by technology for business purposes. And so it's an important factor. But at the same time, there are people, like David said, that 70-year-old gentleman, he obviously wouldn't agree with me on that. He uses paper.
That's my dad. He's got a cell phone, but he just learned how to text. Just saying.
Actually, it's not totally accurate because, hopefully David's dad will live till 120. The gentleman we talked about, that 70-year-old, he's gone, like I said. So it's different to people. But yeah, you're right. I understand the point, and I do have some appreciation for people who try to knock the digital approach and go, back to the driving horses to work. So I understand all of that. But at the same time, so it's an interesting situation here. So I usually approach stuff from a logical, efficient standpoint to try to get problems resolved. David, from our discussions, approaches it strictly from a business strategy, what makes sense for that particular customer, for that particular business, without looking at the technical or technology side of things as the main driving vehicle for improvement. And so we disagree a little bit on some of these things because of that. But basically, that's what we have, and I'm hoping that David will not hold it against me. I'm forgetting my English. Maybe I should switch to Russian. And we will talk again, hopefully soon. And I thank everybody for joining. And thank you, David, one more time.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.